John had always been the kind of man who believed in love. From the moment he met Emily, he knew she was the one. Their relationship had started like a dream, full of passion, laughter, and endless conversations that lasted late into the night. Emily was everything he had ever wanted in a partner: smart, beautiful, and caring. When they exchanged vows 10 years ago, John had promised to love her forever, and he meant every word. For a decade, their life together seemed like a fairy tale. They had built a comfortable home, shared countless memories, and even traveled the world together. Their friends often joked about how perfect they were for each other. "If anyone has marriage figured out, it's you two," they would say. And John believed it. He was a devoted husband, always attentive to Emily's needs and eager to make her happy. From surprise weekend getaways to quiet nights cooking dinner together, he cherished every moment they shared. But over the past few months, something had changed. It was subtle at first, so subtle that John could barely put his finger on it. Emily seemed more distant, distracted, as if her mind was somewhere else. She started coming home later than usual, often with vague excuses about work meetings or catching up with old friends. When John asked her about it, she would smile, brush it off, and assure him that everything was fine. He believed her. After all, they were solid, weren't they? He chalked it up to stress. Emily had always been ambitious, constantly pushing herself at work, and John figured she was just dealing with the pressures of her job. Maybe I should plan something special to help her relax, he thought. He never doubted her loyalty, not for a second. The thought of betrayal didn't even cross his mind. John continued to go about his days, blissfully unaware of the storm that was brewing. He still brought her flowers every Friday, just like he had done for years. He still sent her sweet texts during the day, little reminders of how much he loved her. In his eyes, their marriage was strong, built on trust and love. From the outside, everything seemed perfect. They were the couple everyone admired, the couple everyone wanted to be. But behind closed doors, something was slipping away. John didn't know it yet, but the life he had worked so hard to build was about to be shattered. It was a quiet Tuesday evening when John's world began to unravel. Emily was in the shower, and John, feeling relaxed after a long day at work, sat on the couch scrolling through his phone. He reached over to the coffee table to grab the remote, but instead, his hand brushed against Emily's phone. The screen lit up, showing a new message. It was from Mark, one of John's closest friends. The preview read, "I can't stop thinking about last night. When can we meet again?" John felt a chill run down his spine. His heart pounded in his chest as he stared at the screen, trying to make sense of what he had just seen. It must be a misunderstanding, he thought, his mind racing for a rational explanation. But curiosity gnawed at him, and despite the uneasy feeling settling in his gut, he picked up her phone and unlocked it. What he found shattered him. The messages were undeniable. There, in front of his eyes, was the proof of Emily's betrayal. She had been meeting Mark behind his back, sharing intimate moments that were supposed to belong to John and her alone. The words on the screen blurred as tears welled up in his eyes. His hands trembled as he scrolled through weeks, possibly months, of secret conversations. Every sweet word, every stolen moment described in those texts felt like a knife to his heart. The affair wasn't just physical. The messages were filled with emotions, confessions, and plans that made John feel like a ghost in his own marriage. The wife he thought he knew, the friend he trusted implicitly, had been deceiving him all along. John dropped the phone as if it had burned him, his mind spinning in disbelief. How could this be happening? The room seemed to close in on him as the realization sank in. His marriage, his friendship, his life as he knew it, it had all been a lie. For a moment, John sat there, completely numb. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Then the anger hit. It rose from the pit of his stomach, fiery and consuming. How could Emily do this to him? After everything they had been through together, after all the love and trust he had given her, she had betrayed him in the worst possible way. And with Mark of all people, the man he had considered a brother. John stood up, pacing the room, his mind racing. He wanted to scream, to confront Emily the moment she stepped out of the shower, to demand answers. But as the anger surged, something colder, sharper, took its place. Confronting her now would give her the chance to explain, to lie, to manipulate the situation. No, she didn't deserve that opportunity. she deserved to feel the same humiliation and betrayal that she had inflicted on him. John took a deep breath, the fury in his chest simmering into something more controlled. Revenge. That's what she deserved. He wouldn't just let this slide. No, he would make her pay. And when he did, she would never see it coming. With newfound determination, John carefully placed Emily's phone back on the table. He wiped his eyes, forcing himself to think clearly. He couldn't let on that he knew. Not yet. He would bide his time, gather his strength, and when the moment was right, he would strike. She would never forget what she had done, and neither would Mark. As Emily stepped out of the bathroom, humming a soft tune, John glanced at her, forcing a smile. The plan was already forming in his mind. He had a vow renewal ceremony to plan. In the days following his discovery, John became a man of two faces. To the world, and to Emily, he was the same loving, devoted husband he had always been. But beneath that calm exterior, a storm of betrayal and rage was brewing. Every time he looked at her, every time she smiled at him, he had to suppress the urge to confront her. But John knew better. He knew that the longer he kept his emotions hidden, the more powerful his revenge would be. So he played the role of the doting husband. He surprised Emily with flowers, took her to dinner at her favorite restaurants, and even planned a spontaneous weekend getaway. Emily seemed to relax, her old warmth returning as she basked in what she believed was her husband's unwavering love. John watched her closely, noting every time her phone buzzed with a new message and how she would glance at it quickly before putting it away. She thought she was clever, but John saw everything. Then, one evening over dinner, John made his move. "You know, Emily," he began, his voice soft and sincere. "I've been thinking a lot about us lately, about our marriage. We've been together for 10 years, and I feel like... I don't know. I just feel like we should celebrate that. Something special to mark how far we've come." Emily looked up from her plate, surprised but pleased. "What do you mean?" she asked, curiosity and a hint of relief in her eyes. John smiled, reaching across the table to take her hand. "I was thinking, what if we renewed our wedding vows? We've built a life together, and I want to reaffirm those promises we made to each other. What do you think?" Her reaction was everything John had hoped for. Emily's eyes filled with emotion, and she squeezed his hand tightly. "Oh, John, that's beautiful," she said, her voice trembling with what he could only assume was a mixture of guilt and gratitude. "I would love that. I really would." John nodded, keeping his smile in place. "Great. Let's make it something special. Invite our family, our closest friends, a real celebration of us." As Emily excitedly began to talk about ideas for the ceremony, John's mind was already elsewhere. He had set the stage. Now, it was time to plan his masterpiece. The weeks leading up to the vow renewal ceremony were a whirlwind of preparation, and John played his part perfectly. He threw himself into the details, meticulously planning every aspect of the event. The venue was a charming garden they had both loved, a place filled with happy memories from their earlier days together. He sent out invitations to friends and family, personally calling those closest to them to ensure their attendance. He even invited Mark, the man who had betrayed him. That would be the final stroke of his plan. Behind the scenes, John was just as busy. He gathered all the evidence of Emily's infidelity, screenshots of the incriminating texts, photos of her secret rendezvous, and even recordings of their conversations. He compiled everything into a presentation, something that would leave no room for doubt when the time came to reveal the truth. Despite the whirlwind of emotions churning inside him, John remained outwardly calm, even affectionate. He found it disturbingly easy to act like the husband Emily believed him to be. It was almost therapeutic, knowing that every sweet word, every loving gesture, was part of the intricate web he was weaving. Emily had no idea what was coming, and that made his determination even stronger. The night before the ceremony, John sat alone in his study, reviewing everything one last time. He went over the sequence of events in his mind, rehearsing his words, imagining the look on Emily's face when she realized what was happening. There was no turning back now. Tomorrow, everything would change. Emily had been glowing with happiness in the days leading up to the event. She believed she had escaped unscathed, that her secret affair would remain hidden forever. John watched her with cold, calculating eyes, waiting for the moment when her world would come crashing down. As they went to bed that night, Emily wrapped her arms around him, whispering how excited she was for the next day. John kissed her softly, his mind already on the ceremony. Tomorrow, in front of everyone they knew, he would deliver the performance of a lifetime. And when it was over, Emily would be left in ruins just as she had left his heart. The day of the vow renewal ceremony had arrived, and the setting was nothing short of picturesque. The garden venue was adorned with delicate white roses, soft, twinkling lights, and elegant seating for their closest friends and family. A gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers through the air, and the late afternoon sun bathed everything in a warm, golden glow. It was the perfect backdrop for what everyone believed would be a touching celebration of love and commitment. Emily looked radiant in her ivory dress, a soft smile gracing her lips as she greeted the arriving guests. She appeared the picture of a happy, devoted wife, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit. John, dressed in a tailored suit, moved through the crowd with ease, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries. But beneath his calm demeanor, his heart raced with anticipation. The moment he had been planning for weeks was almost here. As the guests took their seats, a hush fell over the garden. The ceremony was about to begin. John and Emily stood at the altar, facing each other, their hands gently intertwined. Emily's eyes shimmered with emotion as she gazed at John, while he looked back at her with a composed, unreadable expression. The officiant began with a few words about love and commitment, but John barely heard them. His mind was entirely focused on what was about to unfold. When the officiant invited them to exchange their vows, John took a deep breath and smiled softly at Emily. He could see the excitement and love in her eyes, and for a fleeting moment, he almost felt a pang of regret for what he was about to do. Almost. But then, the image of her betrayal flashed through his mind, and any doubts evaporated. John took a step closer, still holding her hands, and began to speak. His voice was calm, measured, and filled with sincerity. "Emily," he said, his eyes locked onto hers. "These past 10 years with you have been filled with love, with joy, and with memories that I will cherish forever. We've shared a life together, and through all the ups and downs, I believed we could face anything as long as we had each other." Emily's smile widened, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. The guests leaned in, touched by John's heartfelt words. "But," John continued, his voice dropping slightly, "sometimes life throws us challenges we never expect. And sometimes, the people we trust the most are the ones who hurt us in ways we never imagined." The atmosphere shifted. Emily's smile faltered, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. The guests exchanged puzzled glances, sensing that something wasn't right. John released her hands and took a step back, his gaze now cool and unwavering. "Emily," he said, his voice gaining strength, "I've been holding something back. You see, this ceremony isn't just about renewing our vows. It's about telling the truth. And the truth is, I know about your affair." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Emily's face went pale, her eyes wide with shock and disbelief. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The guests sat frozen, unable to comprehend what they were hearing. John didn't give her a chance to recover. He pulled a small remote from his pocket, clicking a button that activated a screen behind them. In an instant, images and messages appeared. Screenshots of her conversations with Mark, photos of their secret meetings, undeniable evidence of her betrayal. The garden was filled with stunned silence as everyone took in the damning evidence. John's voice cut through the stillness, calm and controlled. "For months, Emily has been cheating on me with Mark," he said, gesturing to where his supposed friend sat in the crowd. Mark's face turned ashen, and he shifted uncomfortably in his seat as all eyes turned toward him. Emily finally found her voice, trembling as she stammered, "John, I can explain, please just let me—" But John held up a hand, silencing her. "There's nothing left to explain, Emily. You made your choices. And now, everyone knows the truth." Tears streamed down Emily's face as she looked around in desperation, realizing the enormity of the humiliation she was facing. Friends and family stared at her in shock, disbelief, and pity. The weight of the public exposure was crushing. John turned to the guests, his tone shifting to something more resolute. "I didn't do this to hurt anyone," he said. "I did it because I deserve better. I deserve the truth. And now that it's out in the open, I can finally move on from this nightmare." With those final words, John turned his back on the altar, on Emily, on the entire facade that had been their marriage. The crowd remained silent, stunned by the turn of events as John walked away from the ceremony, leaving Emily alone at the altar, humiliated, exposed, and utterly broken. The ceremony was over, but the aftermath had only just begun. The aftermath of the vow renewal ceremony was a whirlwind of emotions and consequences. As John walked away from the altar, leaving Emily crumpled in her humiliation, a murmur of disbelief and sympathy swept through the crowd. Friends and family who had come expecting to witness a celebration of love were now grappling with the reality of betrayal and revenge laid bare before them. Emily stood frozen at the altar, her tear-streaked face a mixture of shock, shame, and desperation. She tried to speak, to find the words that could undo the devastation John had just unleashed, but nothing came. The reality of what she had done crashed down on her as she realized that there was no escape from this public disgrace. Mark, too, sat in stunned silence, his face pale as the weight of his actions sunk in. He avoided the judgmental stares of the people around him, knowing that his reputation, like Emily's, had been irreparably damaged. In the days that followed, the fallout from John's revelation rippled through their lives. Word of the ceremony spread quickly among their social circles, and Emily became a pariah. Once admired for her charm and grace, she was now the subject of hushed whispers and cold shoulders. Friends who had once welcomed her into their homes now kept their distance, unable to look past the betrayal that had torn John's life apart. Meanwhile, John found himself surrounded by support. Friends and family reached out, offering him comfort and praise for his courage in exposing the truth. They admired his strength for standing up to the betrayal and refusing to let it destroy him. Though he had been hurt, John had emerged from the ordeal with his dignity intact, and that, more than anything, gave him the sense of closure he needed. Determined to move forward, John wasted no time in filing for divorce. The process was swift and decisive, with John making it clear that there would be no reconciliation. He was done with Emily and the lies she had built around their marriage. The legal proceedings were just a formality. He had already moved on emotionally. As the weeks passed, John began to rebuild his life. He reconnected with old friends, people he hadn't seen much of during his marriage. It felt good to surround himself with genuine relationships again, people who cared for him without pretense. He took up new hobbies, filling his time with activities that brought him joy and fulfillment. Whether it was hiking, painting, or simply enjoying a quiet evening with friends, John found himself rediscovering who he was outside of his broken marriage. There were moments, of course, when the pain would resurface. Late at night, when the house was quiet, John would occasionally think back to the life he had thought he would share with Emily, the future they had planned. But those moments grew fewer and farther between as he focused on the life he was building for himself now. A life free from lies and deceit. One evening, as he sat on his porch watching the sun set over the horizon, John allowed himself a moment of reflection. The betrayal had hurt, more than anything he had ever experienced. But in the end, it hadn't broken him. Instead, it had revealed a strength within him that he hadn't known existed. He had faced the pain head-on, exposed the truth, and emerged victorious. And in doing so, he had freed himself from a toxic relationship that had been slowly draining him. Emily was left to deal with the consequences of her actions. John no longer concerned himself with her fate. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. As for John, he was ready for whatever came next. He was stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace the future with open arms. With a deep breath, John smiled to himself. The chapter with Emily was over. A new one had begun, and this time, it was his story to write. John had triumphed in the end, not through violence or anger, but through carefully planned, decisive action. His dignity remained intact, and he had shown the world that he would not be a victim of betrayal. Instead, he had taken control of his own narrative, turning the pain of infidelity into a story of personal growth and newfound freedom. The past was behind him now, and John was ready to live his life on his own terms. Emily's betrayal would no longer define him. His strength, resilience, and victory would. Thank you for listening to this story of betrayal, revenge, and triumph. If you enjoyed watching John take control of his life and come out on top, don't forget to give this video a like. And if you want more gripping stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to Only Stories About Men. Here, we share the tales of real men who faced the darkest moments and found the strength to rise above them. Stay tuned for more unforgettable stories of betrayal, revenge, and redemption. See you in the next one.